The sun was setting on the distant horizon as Jason trekked through the vast, barren land of an alien world. He had been exploring this planet for weeks, hoping to discover something new. The research mission he was on had been uneventful until now, but he had always known that the universe held secrets just waiting to be found. The dirt beneath his boots was soft, and the winds whispered through the tall, strange grass. Jason's eyes scanned the empty expanse, his senses alert for anything unusual. He had been walking for hours when he came upon the ruins. The structures were unlike anything he had ever seen before. Towering, smooth stone buildings that were strangely intact despite the centuries, maybe even millennia, that had passed. The architecture seemed to hint at a once great civilization, now lost to time. Jason was a researcher, but the feeling of excitement surged through him. This was what he had been searching for. The ruins weren't just any ancient site. They were the remnants of an unknown alien race. Every piece of stone held a mystery, and Jason was determined to uncover it. He stepped carefully through the ruins, trying not to disturb the ancient stones, but curiosity kept pulling him further in. His eyes were drawn to one building in particular, darker, more imposing than the rest. Its entrance was narrow and covered with thick vines, giving it an even more eerie and abandoned feel. The air was cooler here, and something about the silence felt heavier, as if the very atmosphere held the weight of forgotten history. Jason's heart beat faster as he pushed aside the vines and entered the building. Inside, the structure was dimly lit, the only light coming from the strange, glowing crystals embedded in the walls. The stone floor was cracked, and bits of old furniture were scattered around, broken and decayed. Yet, as Jason stepped deeper into the room, his eyes caught something that made him freeze. At the far end of the room, sitting motionless against the wall, was an alien woman. She sat cross-legged, her hands resting lightly on her lap, staring at the floor. Her skin was pale, almost bluish in tone, with a soft, ethereal glow to it, like moonlight on a clear night. Her long hair cascaded down her back, dark with streaks of silver. Jason couldn't help but notice how delicate she looked, like a figure carved from stone yet strangely alive. She was unlike any species he had ever encountered. For a moment, Jason simply stood there, unsure of what to do. The woman didn't move. Her eyes were closed, her expression neutral. It was as if she didn't even notice him standing there. The silence in the room was thick, the kind that presses in on you, making it hard to breathe. Jason took a cautious step forward, unsure of what to expect. He had no idea who she was, where she came from, or why she was here. But he could feel something powerful and ancient, lingering in the air around her. He took another step, his boots echoing softly against the stone floor. Still, she didn't move. The closer he got, the more he felt an inexplicable pull, as though the very room was drawing him toward her. He stopped a few feet away, watching her closely. Her breathing was slow, almost rhythmic, but it wasn't enough to give him any answers. He wanted to speak, to ask her if she was all right, but for some reason, the words didn't come. Instead, he knelt down in front of her, observing her with fascination. Her features were soft but strange, with high cheekbones and delicate markings on her skin that seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light. Jason knew that she wasn't from Earth. He could tell that by the way her body seemed to move with an elegance that was impossible for humans. But what really puzzled him was her silence. Her entire demeanor suggested she had been here for a long time. But why hadn't she left? Why hadn't she spoken? Jason reached out tentatively, his hand hovering near hers. The air around them seemed to pulse with an unspoken tension, but still, she didn't move. Was she in some sort of stasis? Had something happened to her that kept her from speaking, or had she simply chosen to remain quiet? He didn't know, but in the pit of his stomach, he felt something stir, a sense of longing that he couldn't explain. "I'm not here to hurt you," Jason murmured, his voice soft but firm. His words seemed to float in the air, but the woman didn't react. He wondered if she even heard him. She had been sitting in silence for so long that perhaps she had forgotten how to speak, or perhaps she had chosen not to. He felt a strange sense of responsibility, a pull to help her, to understand why she had been trapped in this place for so long. Who had left her here? What had happened to the people of this ancient civilization? And why hadn't she spoken for so many years? Jason couldn't answer these questions, but as he stared at her, he felt something else, something that he couldn't ignore. The woman's presence had stirred something deep within him, a feeling of connection he hadn't anticipated. For reasons he couldn't explain, he knew that this encounter was just the beginning of something much greater. With a deep breath, Jason stood up slowly, his gaze lingering on her. "I'll find a way to help you," he said, his voice filled with a quiet promise. But as he turned to leave, he felt her eyes follow him. The woman's gaze was no longer distant. For the first time, she seemed aware of his presence. Jason stopped in his tracks, his heart skipping a beat. And then, in the stillness of the ancient room, the woman's lips parted ever so slightly. The days that followed were a mixture of silence and slow discovery. Jason stayed by the alien woman's side, learning more about her in small, quiet moments. He would bring her food, offer her water, and sometimes just sit with her, letting the stillness speak for itself. There was an unspoken understanding between them. Neither of them pushed the other, yet they were both present in this strange, foreign place for the same reason: to heal. She hadn't spoken since that first whisper, and Jason had begun to wonder if she would ever speak again. The initial breakthrough had felt like a miracle, but now, as time passed, it began to feel like the silence was creeping back in. Her eyes were still as bright as ever, still full of that quiet sadness, but her lips remained sealed. Despite the silence, Jason didn't give up. He knew that there was something deeper, something buried beneath her calm exterior, and he couldn't walk away from that. Every day, he would talk to her, softly, reassuringly. He didn't expect an immediate response. He didn't even need one. He just wanted her to know that she wasn't alone. One afternoon, Jason decided to try something different. He brought an old, battered notebook with him, a relic from Earth. It had been his journal from earlier expeditions, filled with his observations and sketches. He opened it to a blank page, placing it between them. He then picked up a pen and began to write, not knowing what he would put down, but feeling the urge to share his thoughts with her. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper filled the room, breaking the silence between them. The alien woman's eyes flickered toward the notebook, her gaze following his every movement. She didn't speak, but Jason could feel the shift. Something in her was awake, something had changed. She was watching him carefully, as if she were trying to understand what he was doing. Jason paused, glancing up at her. "This is where I keep my thoughts," he said, his voice soft. "Maybe you can write something too, if you feel like it. You don't have to speak. Just let your thoughts out." He handed her the pen, and for a long moment, she simply stared at it. Jason's heart raced, unsure of what would happen next. Was she ready to try again, or would she remain silent, trapped in a world of her own making? Then, slowly, her hand reached forward. She picked up the pen with surprising delicacy, her fingers curling around it in a way that felt so natural, so human. For the first time, Jason saw her move with purpose. She was no longer just a passive figure, but an active participant in the moment. She hesitated, her eyes glancing at the page, and then, with a deep breath, she began to write. The movements of her hand were slow at first, almost unsure, but then they grew steadier. Jason watched in awe as the ink flowed across the page, words forming in strange, flowing characters that he didn't recognize. It was a language unfamiliar to him, but somehow he could feel the emotion behind each stroke. He could sense that this was her first attempt to communicate in years, and the weight of that was not lost on him. He wanted to ask her what it meant, but he held back, giving her the space to express herself. After several minutes, she stopped, her hand resting on the page. She looked up at him, Her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Fear? Or was it something else? A sense of relief, perhaps? Jason leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. I can't understand what you wrote, but I can see that it matters. It's a start. You're not alone anymore. The alien woman's eyes softened, and for the first time in days, Jason saw a flicker of something he hadn't seen before. Hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there. He could feel it in the air between them, as if something long buried was beginning to resurface. She looked back down at the notebook and slowly began to write again. This time, the characters were different, less formal, more flowing. Jason couldn't understand them, but he didn't need to. The act of writing was enough. It was as if she had found a way to express herself, a way to be heard without speaking. Hours passed, and Jason sat with her, watching as she filled the pages with her thoughts, her feelings. Sometimes she would pause, her hand hovering over the paper, as if she were gathering the courage to write something new. Other times she would write quickly, as if the words were rushing out of her, desperate to escape the confines of her silence. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the room, Jason felt a strange sense of peace. The silence between them was still there, but it no longer felt oppressive. The alien woman was no longer just a figure in the shadows. She had become a person again, a person who was choosing to speak through her actions, through her pen. She had found a way to connect with him. And that was all that mattered. Jason didn't know what the future held for them, but he knew one thing: they would face it together. The alien woman looked up at him once more, her eyes filled with something new, something that made Jason's heart swell with warmth. She didn't need to speak to him. She had already done so in a way that words could never truly capture. For the first time, Jason saw her not as a broken, silent figure, but as someone capable of healing, of moving forward. She wasn't alone anymore, and neither was he. Jason had not expected the alien woman's reaction. The way her eyes followed him as he turned to leave startled him. There was a faint spark of recognition in her gaze, something he hadn't noticed before. It was almost as if she had been trapped in her own mind for years, and for the first time, she was reaching out, if only with her eyes. Jason froze in place. He wasn't sure whether to stay or go. His heart raced as he tried to understand what was happening. It was clear now that the woman had been aware of him the whole time. She had just been waiting for the right moment, perhaps even testing him. But what had kept her silent for so long? He stepped back slowly, unsure of how to approach her now. His mind raced with questions, but there was one that stood out above all the others. Why hadn't she spoken for so long? The room seemed colder now, the silence heavier, as if it had become a living thing. Jason took a deep breath and knelt down once again in front of her. He hadn't expected to feel this way, this sense of connection. There was something almost sacred about the quiet stillness of the moment. He realized that, deep down, he wanted to help her. He didn't know why, but he could sense that whatever had caused her to stop speaking was more than just physical. It was something emotional, something deep within her. He studied her closely. Her features were alien, yes, but they also had a human-like softness to them. Her face was delicate, but her eyes were full of history, full of sorrow. Jason could see the weight of years in them. Years of silence, of solitude. What could have caused such a thing? Why was she here, so far from her home? And why, despite everything, had she not spoken a single word for so long? As Jason sat there, his gaze never leaving hers, he realized that this alien woman had been trapped in more ways than one. The silence around them wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of life, of hope. It was clear that she had suffered greatly. But what had broken her? Was it the fall of her people? A terrible betrayal? Or something even worse? Jason thought back to the first time he saw her, sitting so still, her gaze distant, as if her mind was far away, lost in some forgotten memory. Now, as he looked into her eyes, he wondered if she had been waiting for someone, something, to bring her back to the world. He wanted to ask her so many things, but the words never came. Instead, he reached out cautiously and placed his hand near hers. There was a brief moment of hesitation before her hand twitched slightly, just enough for Jason to notice. It was as if she was considering whether to make contact, whether to reach out and trust him. The moment hung in the air for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, her hand moved. At first, it was just a light touch, barely enough to feel. But it was enough to send a wave of relief through Jason's chest. It was as if a barrier had been broken, as if the silence that had surrounded her for years had finally begun to lift. On felt the warmth of her hand against his, and for the first time since he had discovered her, he felt like there was hope. She didn't speak, but her presence felt different now, less distant, less detached. The woman's eyes softened, and she looked at him with a quiet, uncertain expression, as if unsure of what to do next. Jason waited, his heart pounding, unsure of how to proceed. He finally found his voice, though it was much softer than he intended. "You don't have to be afraid," he said. His voice was gentle, almost a whisper, as if he didn't want to disturb the fragile moment between them. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to help." Her hand remained in his, warm but delicate. For a long while, there was only silence, but it was no longer heavy. There was a strange, comforting stillness in the room, like the calm before a storm. Jason didn't move, didn't speak again, just let the silence stretch between them. It was as if the quiet was a language of its own, one they both understood. Then, after what felt like an eternity, the alien woman's lips parted. It wasn't much, just the slightest movement, but it was enough. For the first time in years, she had made an attempt to speak. Her voice, when it came, was barely a whisper. Jason leaned in closer, straining to catch the words. "Help. Me?" she murmured, her voice cracking like a branch, snapping under the weight of too many years of silence. Jason's heart swelled with emotion. The words were simple, but they carried so much weight. He had no idea what she was asking for help with, whether it was the physical pain of isolation or something deeper, something that had broken her in ways he couldn't even begin to understand. But he knew one thing for sure. She had spoken. She had broken the silence. And now, something inside Jason shifted. He no longer saw the alien woman as just a lost figure in an abandoned room. He saw her as a person who had suffered, who had endured unimaginable loneliness, and yet, against all odds, had found the strength to reach out. Her first words were a plea, a cry for help, and Jason knew that he couldn't walk away from that. "I'm here," he whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "I won't leave you." The woman's eyes met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something more than sorrow in her gaze. It was a spark of hope, fragile but real. And Jason made a promise to himself in that moment. He would do whatever it took to help her. But as the silence began to fall again, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that the road ahead would be far more complicated than he could ever imagine. Whatever had happened to this woman, whatever had caused her to fall silent for so many years, was far from over. And it was just the beginning. The days that followed felt different. Jason had watched the alien woman begin to change, slowly but surely. She had started to use the notebook to communicate, each page filled with flowing, intricate characters, words from a language he couldn't understand but still deeply moved him. Though her voice remained silent, her written words spoke volumes. Jason spent hours reading what she wrote, trying to decipher the meaning behind the strange symbols. He wasn't sure if he'd ever fully understand, but the connection between them was growing. Her words, even if not yet spoken aloud, felt like a bridge between their worlds. One afternoon, while Jason was poring over the pages, trying to make sense of the alien script, the woman approached him. She sat beside him in the quiet room, her presence calming, and waited for him to acknowledge her. He looked up, and for a moment, their eyes locked. There was a soft determination in her gaze, as though she was ready to share something important. She reached for the notebook, her movements slow but purposeful, and began to write again. Jason leaned forward, his eyes filled with curiosity. What would she write this time? What had been so difficult to express? After a few moments, she turned the notebook toward him. There on the page were simple words, in the same flowing script, but now more deliberate, more direct. I was once a leader, it began. Jason's heart skipped a beat. She had never shared this before. The words seemed to hang in the air between them, their weight more than just ink on paper. She had been important. Someone powerful, someone with responsibility. I led my people. I gave them hope, but I failed them. Jason's eyes widened. The sadness in her words was palpable, even in written form. She was carrying the burden of failure, the weight of an entire people's fate on her shoulders. The alien woman had been a leader, but it seemed something had gone terribly wrong. He waited, his breath steady, trying to absorb the meaning behind her words. What had caused her to fall silent all these years? What had happened to her people? We were betrayed, she continued, her handwriting slightly shaky. Our enemies used our trust against us. They took everything, our homes, our families, our future. Jason felt a pang of empathy. Betrayal was something that transcended species. He could understand the deep pain she was feeling. He had seen it on Earth in different forms, on a personal level, in wars, in heartbreak. But to hear it from someone who had led a civilization, who had watched it crumble, was something else entirely. I tried to fight. I tried to protect them, the next line read. But I was too weak. My people died. And I couldn't stop it. Jason sat back, the weight of her words pressing down on him. This wasn't just about the alien woman's silence. It was about the trauma she had lived through, the responsibility she had carried, and the loss she had endured. She had been a leader, and now she was alone. The room felt heavy, as if the air itself was thick with sorrow. Jason glanced at the woman beside him, still sitting quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She didn't look at him, but there was something in her posture that told him she was waiting for him to understand. She wanted him to hear her, even if she couldn't say the words out loud. Jason took a deep breath. He had to do something. He couldn't just sit there, silently reading her pain. He had to show her that she wasn't alone, that he was there for her. He reached out, his hand hovering near hers. Slowly, she turned her palm upward, and he took her hand in his. The simple touch felt like an anchor in the storm that was swirling around them. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "I can't imagine what you went through. But I'm here. And you don't have to carry this alone anymore." The alien woman's gaze softened as she looked at him, her eyes still filled with that same sadness, but there was something else now, a glimmer of trust. She had shared her pain with him, and in doing so, she had allowed herself to be vulnerable. Jason could see that it wasn't just the silence she had been trapped in. It was the guilt, the grief, and the loss that had held her captive all these years. She reached for the notebook again and began to write once more. Jason watched as she carefully formed the letters, her fingers trembling slightly. It was clear she was putting everything into this moment, everything she had kept locked inside for so long. When she finished, she turned the notebook toward him again. This time, the words were different. There was a new energy in them, a sense of something changing. "I can't change the past," it said, "but I can choose how I move forward. I'm not a failure. I am still alive. I still have the chance to make a difference." Jason felt his heart swell. This was the breakthrough he had been hoping for. She was healing. She was starting to believe in herself again. The weight of the years, the silence, the sorrow, they hadn't disappeared, but they were no longer all-consuming. The alien woman was finding her voice again, not through words, but through her actions, her choices. "Thank you," Jason whispered, squeezing her hand gently. "I'm proud of you, and I'll help you. Whatever you need, I'll be here." For the first time, the alien woman gave him a small, almost imperceptible smile. It was a small gesture, but to Jason, it felt like a victory. She was no longer just the broken figure in the ruins. She was a survivor, a person with a past, and now, a future. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: they would face it together. Days passed, and the alien woman's strength grew. Every day, she wrote in the notebook. Each word, each line, revealed a little more about her past, her pain, and her hopes. Jason found himself more and more captivated by her resilience. He could see it in the way she moved, in the way she looked at the world around her. She was beginning to heal. Yet, despite all the progress, Jason knew there was still something deeply troubling her. She had shared her story with him, but there were still unanswered questions, things she hadn't said, things she hadn't written. There were secrets she kept hidden in the depths of her mind, and Jason couldn't help but feel that they were the key to understanding everything. One evening, as the two of them sat together under the dim light of the room, Jason noticed something in the alien woman's expression, a shift, as though she had finally made a decision. She had spent hours writing in the notebook, but tonight she didn't pick it up. Instead, she simply sat there, her hands resting in her lap, staring at the floor. Jason could feel her hesitation. She was thinking about something important, something she hadn't shared yet. After a long silence, the woman finally looked up at him. Her gaze was steady, serious, but there was a flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. She opened her mouth as though she was about to speak, but no words came out. Jason waited, his heart beating a little faster. It wasn't often she tried to speak aloud anymore. Then she closed her mouth and picked up the notebook. With careful, deliberate strokes, she wrote again. Jason watched, his eyes scanning the page. She was writing more than usual, the ink flowing quickly, almost as though she had been waiting for this moment, for the right time to reveal whatever it was she needed to say. When she finished, she turned the notebook toward him. This time, the words felt different, more direct, more urgent. "They're coming for me," it read. Jason's pulse quickened. He stared at the words, his mind racing. "Who?" he asked softly, his voice almost a whisper. The alien woman's hands trembled slightly as she continued to write, her expression unreadable. Jason could see the depth of her fear, even if she didn't speak it aloud. "The ones who betrayed me, the ones who destroyed my people, they haven't forgotten, and they will never forgive." Jason's stomach dropped. He hadn't fully grasped the magnitude of what had happened to her, but now he understood. Her silence wasn't just about personal pain. It was about a threat that was still looming, a threat that was coming for her, no matter how much time had passed. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Jason asked, his voice thick with concern. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. She had been silent for so long about the danger, and now it was clear that the past wasn't just a burden. It was still alive, still hunting her. She looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of regret and determination. Then she picked up the pen and wrote again. "I didn't want to drag you into this," she wrote. "I didn't want to involve anyone else in the fight. It's my responsibility. My people are gone. There's nothing left for me here. I'm alone." Jason's heart clenched. She was still carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She had been trying to protect him, to shield him from the past, but she was wrong. She wasn't alone anymore. He had chosen to stay by her side, no matter the cost. He wasn't going anywhere. "You're not alone," he said, his voice steady now. "You have me. I'm not going to leave you." Her eyes searched his face, and for a moment, Jason saw something there, a spark of hope, fragile but real. It was a look he hadn't seen from her before. It was as if she was finally allowing herself to believe in something again, something beyond the pain, beyond the fear. She wrote again, more slowly this time, as though weighing every word. "I was the one who failed. I should have been able to protect them, to stop them, but I couldn't." Jason shook his head, his heart aching. "No, you didn't fail. You were a leader. You did everything you could. The ones who did this to you, to your people, they are the ones who failed." The alien woman paused, her eyes narrowing as though she were deep in thought. Then, slowly, she set the pen down and looked at Jason. For the first time, she seemed less burdened, less afraid. It was as if, in that moment, she had allowed herself to accept something she hadn't been able to before, that it wasn't all on her, that she wasn't solely responsible for the destruction of her people. "I'm here," Jason said, his voice firm, his words a promise. "And I'm not going anywhere. We'll face this together." The alien woman didn't write anything more that night, but her silence no longer felt like a barrier. It felt like a moment of understanding, a space between them where words were unnecessary. She looked at him with gratitude in her eyes, and Jason knew that, in that moment, something had shifted. The next morning, the alien woman's mood was different. She moved with more purpose, more strength. It was as though the weight of her past had been lifted, at least a little, by the simple act of sharing it with Jason. She was ready to face whatever came next. And Jason, for the first time, truly believed they had a chance. They had come this far together. They would face the future together, no matter what dangers lay ahead. He didn't know what those dangers were yet, but one thing was clear: they were no longer alone. Together, they were stronger. The following days were filled with tension and urgency. Jason could feel it in the air, the quiet before a storm. The alien woman was no longer the quiet, withdrawn figure she had been when he first found her. She was now determined, resolute, her mind focused on something he still didn't fully understand. Whatever had happened in her past, whatever betrayal had led to the destruction of her people, it was far from over. And now, they were both in danger. As she continued to write in the notebook, Jason noticed a shift in her demeanor. She wasn't just telling him about the past anymore. She was preparing for something. The alien woman's eyes, once filled with sorrow, now held a sharp focus, as though she was trying to piece together something broken. Jason could see the burden still weighing heavily on her, but she was no longer hiding from it. She was facing it head-on. One afternoon, after a long period of silence between them, the woman closed the notebook and looked up at Jason. Her face was pale, her expression serious. The weight of everything that had happened, everything she had been carrying, was still there, but now there was something different in her eyes. Something new. "I have to go," she said, her voice soft, but filled with a sense of finality. Jason felt a wave of panic. "What do you mean? Where are you going?" She hesitated, as though considering her next words carefully. "I need to face them. I can't run forever. They will never stop coming for me unless I stop them. I've been hiding for too long, and I can't keep hiding. They'll find me, and it will be over. For both of us." Jason stood up, his hands trembling with uncertainty. He could feel the fear creeping into his chest. This was more than he had bargained for when he had first stumbled upon her in the ruins. She wasn't just a woman in need of help. She was someone fighting against something far larger, far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. "You don't have to do this alone," Jason said, his voice firm. "I'm not going to let you face this by yourself. You don't have to carry this burden alone anymore." The alien woman looked at him, her eyes softening slightly. She had always been strong, but now, for the first time, Jason could see the vulnerability in her. She wasn't just a leader, a warrior. She was a person who had been hurt, betrayed, and left alone to fight her battles. She had carried the weight of the world for so long, and now she was ready to face it again. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "They are ruthless. They don't stop. They will destroy everything in their path to get what they want. My people are gone, Jason. I was the one who failed them. I couldn't protect them. And now, I can't protect you either." Jason felt a knot tighten in his chest. He had been afraid of this, afraid that, no matter how much he cared for her, he wouldn't be able to protect her. But the truth was, he couldn't let her face this alone. He had already chosen his path, and it led him right here, right beside her. "I'm not afraid," Jason said, his voice steady. "I'm with you. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. I won't let you go through this alone." The alien woman studied him for a long moment, as though weighing his words. Finally, she nodded, a small but grateful smile tugging at her lips. I don't know if I can protect you, but I'll try. I can't promise we'll make it out of this, but I can promise I won't run anymore. Jason reached out and took her hand. I don't need you to promise me anything. I'm here because I want to be. You're not alone, and I'm not going anywhere. For the first time, the alien woman truly seemed to believe him. Her hand, once hesitant and cold, felt warm and strong in his. She had been so closed off for so long, but now, for the first time, Jason saw the true power of her resilience. She had been broken, yes, but she wasn't defeated. She had survived the worst, and was still standing. We'll need to prepare, she said, her voice regaining its focus. We need to move quickly. They'll be looking for me, and when they find us, we'll have no time to waste. Jason nodded. He had no idea what they would face, but he knew one thing for certain. He would stand by her side, no matter the cost. He wasn't just going to walk away, not now that they had come so far. Together, they could face whatever came next. For the next few days, they worked together in silence, preparing for the unknown. The alien woman taught Jason about the things she had learned during her years of solitude. How to survive in this alien world, how to defend themselves if the need arose, and most importantly, how to stay one step ahead of the enemy that was hunting her. Every lesson she shared was another piece of her past, another layer of her story. As they made their preparations, Jason couldn't help but marvel at the woman's strength. She wasn't just a survivor, she was a fighter. And in that moment, Jason knew that they were no longer two strangers thrown together by fate. They were partners, bound by the shared belief that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. The alien woman's past was coming for her, but Jason would make sure she didn't face it alone. Whatever they had to face, whatever dangers awaited them, they would face it side by side. And in that moment, Jason felt something shift inside him. A certainty, a resolve. The road ahead might be uncertain, but as long as they had each other, they had a chance. The moment had come. Jason stood beside the alien woman, his hand firmly clasped around hers, their shared determination filling the air between them. The preparations were complete. They had gathered supplies, mapped out an escape route, and prepared themselves for the danger that was about to confront them. The quiet room, once filled only with silence and sorrow, was now a place of purpose. It had become a sanctuary where they had both healed, but it was also a place from which they would soon have to leave. They had to move quickly. The alien woman's past, the enemies who had once betrayed her and destroyed her people, were closing in on them. Jason knew that their time was running out. The calm, peaceful days they had shared were about to come to an end. But despite the uncertainty of what lay ahead, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of calm. He wasn't sure if it was the quiet strength of the woman beside him or the resolve he had found in himself, but he knew that whatever happened next, they were ready. We should leave now, the alien woman said, her voice steady, though her eyes held a depth of emotion that Jason could see even through her calm exterior. They're coming, and if we don't leave soon, it will be too late. Jason nodded, tightening his grip on her hand. Let's go. They stepped out of the room, their footsteps quiet against the cold stone floor. Jason could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The air was thick with the anticipation of what was to come, and yet there was a quiet resolve in both of them. They didn't know exactly what they would face, but they knew they had to face it together. As they moved through the abandoned ruins, Jason couldn't help but glance back at the place they had called home for the past few days. It had been a place of healing, of discovery, of silence that had slowly been broken by shared words and moments of connection. But now, that chapter was closing. The ruins, once a shelter, were now a reminder of the danger that was hunting them. They reached the edge of the ruins, where the darkened landscape stretched out before them. The alien woman looked around, her eyes scanning the horizon, her senses alert. Jason had learned to trust her instincts over the past few weeks. She was a survivor, a leader who had been trained to sense danger before it arrived. But even with her strength, even with all her preparation, Jason could feel the tension building in his chest. "We should head west," she said. Her voice calm but urgent. "There's a small settlement not far from here. We'll be safer there." Jason followed her without question, knowing that wherever she led, he would follow. They moved quickly, staying close to the shadows, their every step deliberate. It was strange. Despite the fear, despite the danger, they were not alone. Jason didn't just have the alien woman by his side. He had someone who truly understood what it meant to fight, to survive, and to never give up. That gave him the strength to keep going, even when his own doubts began to creep in. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, the light fading from the sky, Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. The world around them had grown quiet, the silence broken only by the sound of their footsteps. They moved in sync, both of them hyper-aware of their surroundings. There was no time to waste. Every second counted. The alien woman led the way, her eyes constantly scanning the terrain, her movements sharp and focused. She was a warrior, a protector, and Jason could see that in the way she moved, in the way she carried herself. He couldn't even imagine the weight she had carried for all those years, the responsibility, the guilt. But in that moment, she wasn't a broken leader. She was someone who was ready to fight again, ready to reclaim her future. As they reached the outskirts of the settlement, Jason noticed the woman's slower pace. She paused for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the area. "Something's not right," she muttered, her voice low. Jason felt his heart race. "What is it?" She turned to him, her face serious. "We're not the only ones who know about this place. We need to be careful." Jason's mind raced. They had come so far, and now it seemed like they were stepping right into the heart of danger. But even with the fear that was beginning to settle in his chest, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to back down. Not now, not after everything they had been through. "I'm with you," he said quietly, his voice filled with certainty. The alien woman gave him a brief nod, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Stay close," she said. "And whatever happens, don't let go." Jason didn't answer. There was no need for words. He had made his choice, and there was no turning back. They were in this together, and no matter what they faced, they would face it side by side. They moved through the settlement, staying in the shadows, their footsteps barely making a sound. Jason kept his eyes on the woman beside him, trusting her instincts, trusting her strength. He had no idea what was waiting for them, but he knew one thing. Whatever came, they would handle it together. And so, with the unknown ahead and the dangers closing in, Jason and the alien woman continued forward, their bond stronger than ever. There was no telling what the future held, but as long as they had each other, they had hope.